Technically,
Dad. Yeah.
that's true. So show some respect, young man.
So Lane, he where do we start? Planted a church in Papua New Guinea among an unreached people group. And then in Papua New Guinea, kind of spent 10 or 12 or somewhere around there years with that church. And then was also a consultant for other unreached works, and then now is back in Pennsylvania as a pastor. One of I don't know if I should let him hear this. One of my mentors, guys, I really look up to him a lot. He runs a church, one of the elders or really pastor of a church in Pennsylvania, and they partner now with his church in Papua New Guinea. It's called CR, is the tribal group, the CR Church. So they partner with them and have a couple other partnerships too, but they really focus on that. And they're also obviously very focused on being missional where they're at. So I think he brings a cool perspective of seeing, like, stepping out of the what we kind of see as our way of doing church, having to start from scratch in some ways or in every way with a church, a body of believers in Papua New Guinea, and really rethink how they do church there in light of culture, but also in light of the word. And then I feel like he's brought that back really well to their church in Pennsylvania to really think about why are we doing things? How do we posture ourselves toward each other and the community and the world? So there you have it. I should have muted us on that so you didn't hear too much of that. But yeah, I'll
Mm,
let you
mm.
uh I'll let you take it from there, Lane.
I'll take it from there. Um, yeah, it's good to be with you guys. I don't want to drone on. I know staring at a screen might be your not really your best idea of a Sunday morning. So I'll try to talk a little bit and leave some room if you have questions. I understand a little bit of the journey that you've been on and what the intent of this time that you've had together um, has been for. So, any questions regarding that, or maybe some specifics about what we have done or are doing? I'm very happy to try to answer those in a helpful way. Um, I guess one thing that just came to my mind as Todd was talking, and if I could show you what's in front of me, I've got no notes, so this is no planned thing here. I'm just going to be a little impromptu, but I was thinking of Todd sharing that and thinking in my mind what was the greatest lesson that we've learned through all of that, both in planting the church, trying to disciple the church, and then even coming back here and facing what, in my estimation, over the last 20 years now is it's actually more challenging here than it was there. So as I think about that, I'm just like, what's the takeaway? What's the most important value that drives a meaningful life lived within God's story? Um, and the more that I come back to this, and this is probably not going to blow anyone's mind, but the more that I come back to it is we learned and continue to learn that biblical revelation has to be authoritative in your life. It has to increasingly become the driving value of your life, what God has said, and not just what He has said in some loose, cavalier interpretation of it. I mean, a real, genuine, deep engagement with the Scriptures as much as possible outside of the presuppositions of what you've always maybe been told or thought, but the ability to come to the Scriptures believing that God has spoken. Oh, that's cool. Look at that. That gave me a thumbs up, and I think it does this too, doesn't it? Hey, look at it. It's a good Sunday morning. I'm probably going to trigger that thing 6 times. Okay, sorry. I'm really not celebrating what I'm saying. The phone did it. Um, yeah, I would just urge you to think about the measure with which your life is really built on the authority of God's word. And is it actually authoritative in your life? And I don't mean, do you give it space in your life? That's not what it intends to do, is take up a little space in your life. It was written that it would define your life and it would give you an understanding of identity and purpose and fruitfulness in light of God's larger story. And man, I'll tell you what, being back here and doing this for as long as I've done it, both here and over there, that is the battle for the souls of people. Apparently that was a good thought too. That is the battle for the souls of people, is the authority of the word of God. That is really weird. Do you guys see those little bubble things popping up?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know why it's doing that. That's funny. I'll try not to move. Maybe it's my movement. It's throwing it off. Yeah, so I would just put that out there right at the outset. I don't think there's any way to engage in God's mission locally or globally without a deepening of appreciation authority of what God has said. That at every turn, that will be your greatest adversary. Satan will come to attack you at that level. And he seeks to give you other sources of authority that really bolster your own control of your own life. And he wants to convince you of that and lead you in countless ways where you are the authority and God is not. And so just, that doesn't speak at all specifically to the things maybe that you've been talking about, but at a very, very foundational level in your life, that is going to be it right there. And I think that is what we were challenged with when we were planting the church, after having gotten all this great training and we thought we knew it all and we knew what we were going to do. We found that we were actually really, really ill-informed about that issue right there. And it's constantly what we battle here as a church, even now, is trying to not build a church that's relevant, not build a church that's cool, not build a church that just gets a lot of people in the door, that we're not driven by those things, that we want to be driven by the authority of the scriptures and what God wants his church to be like, and how he wants us to represent him in the world. So that's yeah, whatever, maybe a rabbit trail, maybe whatever, but just I would really begin to consider that deeply as you kind of move off from this. I don't know what's next for you, but I know for sure that if you're gonna walk with God into a life that's meaningful for eternity, it's gonna have to be increasingly on the authority of what he has said, not what podcasts you listen to, not what books you read. It's really on his word and what it said. So anyhow, yeah, Todd and I chatted a little bit in reference to this. I would say that there's just a couple things that maybe, I don't know if this echoes what you have been talking about or studying for the last however many weeks or whatever months that you've been together. But I think there's a few things when you think about the issue of God's mission in the world that need to be really, really clear. One of them is God has one mission in the world. He does not have a local one and a global one. Amen. I think that's been a very, very unhealthy thing in the history of the church, particularly in America. We've kind of separated the two. We don't see them fundamentally at times as the exact same mission everywhere. And God doesn't want to do anything different in Papua New Guinea or Africa or South America than he wants to do in the neighborhood where you live. The exact same thing. So just caution yourself with getting this, like, I'm sort of excited about global missions. It's what a neat thing we do. If you're divorcing that from the neat thing that God wants to do in your life with the neighbor that lives across the street, you don't understand God's mission yet. You're compartmentalizing it in a very unhealthy way. So even removing the idea of like local and global, or at least they're always said together, that our language is God's mission. And God's mission for Ann Arbor is God's mission for Williamsport, Pennsylvania, where I live. It's God's mission in, a far off island in Papua New Guinea too. It's the same mission. So making disciples through the context of the local church, not through anything else, but the local church is God's, it's God's method. It's God's way. It's his plan for reaching the world and making disciples is through this thing called his family, not an organization. It's his family represented in an organic way in every people group all over the world, in every community all over the world. It's just what God's about. It's what he wants us to be about. So I would say that's really central. And I'm sure you talked about this, as you've been dealing with that, but like narrowing down the sort of your focus of what you want to live your life for and how you understand what God's doing, man, needs to be really informed by what Jesus modeled and what he did, and then what he told us to do. So if you really understand your gospels well, the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and even John as well, you see this really simple example that Jesus just was in the world, but radically different from it. He was more concerned about walking with his Father than he was about how people perceived him. I really don't think he would have been super consumed with how many likes or followers he got on social media. I really don't think he would have cared about that too much. I think he cared more about being with people and showing people what his heavenly Father was like, and demonstrating that with other believers so they could see what his Father was like. And he was concerned with the place where he lived. And then not only that, so check out what he does. He gives them this real contextual, local sort of training ground for it. And then after the resurrection, he says, okay, are you guys ready to go do this everywhere else? There's no new strat. There's not like global, local, different. When he set them off, think about it. The only thing they knew was what he did with them. That's all they knew. They knew this idea of go be God's children somewhere where there aren't God's children, and do it with other of God's children so people can see what it is like to live as God's family. Now go do that everywhere, right? And that's all he did with them. And then he says, do it first right here locally in Jerusalem. Then he says, do it in Judea and Samaria, which is the like closer area around them. And then go do it in the uttermost. So just do the same thing I did with you. Just go keep doing this in places where I haven't been. So this is it's very simple. But back to that issue of authority, just think about what that means for every one of you in this room. Like it really means that your first concern really should be, what are you doing in your Jerusalem? Right? It's not like, oh, how can I care about what's happening in the uttermost? It's like, what are you going to do tomorrow, starting tomorrow, with the trajectory of your life for the Jerusalem of where he has put you? Like, here's the deal. There aren't missionaries. Like, you are all them. Everybody in that room that I'm looking, I don't even know your names. You're all missionaries. Whether you want to be or not, you are God's ambassadors. Like, you are, every one of you. If you're a man, you're God's man for where you live, to show them what it's like to be God's child, to invite them into his family, to make disciples of those who aren't. If you're a woman in that, you are God's woman for where you live and where you work and where you play, to be his ambassador there. Like, I'm not. I don't even know where any of you work or where you live or where you play. I don't know anything about it. There's no way that I can be God's man for where you are. You are. And in the same way, you don't even know where I live. You don't know what's going on here. You don't understand the rhythm of life here where we live. It's very different from where you live. But you're not God's ambassador here. I am. Do you know what I'm saying? So like when the mission goes outside of just some far off place to every place, then missionaries are everywhere. If you're God's child, you're it. And it's just how it is with God. And that's like, I get it. Some of you might be struggling. Some of you might be new in Christ, and you're like, I don't even know what I would say, or I don't know how to build a relationship with someone who doesn't know Christ. I completely understand that. That doesn't change the fact that you're his ambassador. It just means you need equipped into how to be his ambassador. It doesn't remove you from that role. And I think this whole thing of like God's mission and even global mission, it has to begin in our own hearts. And it has to radically change the way you live right here. I grew up in a little bit of a different era where global missions was again, it was very divided part of the church. They were these super elites that got sent out. Like they're the real faithful ones, right? They're the amazing ones. I was told this all the time. I could never do what you do. Oh, I couldn't go live over there. I couldn't learn another language. I could never do what you do. Here's a great irony of it. God's asking them to do that. They're literally telling God, I can't be what you've redeemed me to be. No, someone else can do that. And it's like, okay, you might not have to do it learning another language, but you better be able to do what I went to do because you're God's man or woman for where you live. No one else is the hope of eternity for those people but you. And man, I mean, I grew up in that. That was the very traditional view. It's like missionaries they're the amazing ones, and then there's the rest of us, who I guess we just give them our money, right? We just give them our money and let them go do it. No, 1,000 times no, that is not it. You get the privilege of being his ambassador where you live and sacrificially giving to send some of your brothers and sisters to far off places. Like you get the benefit of both. It's an incredible, awesome, eternal opportunity. So that's one thing. And I would just urge you to really, if you're taking takeaways, take away the issue of biblical authority and God's revelation. I'm not telling you those things like this is how I think you should live. I'm just telling you what Jesus said when he left. He's like, all of you. I think about what then he inspired Paul to write, that we collectively have been given the ministry of reconciliation. And he wrote that to a church that was very, very unhealthy. I mean, they were the most unhealthy church in the New Testament. He goes, you are God's ambassadors. God makes his appeal through you. And they were a church in sin, right? They weren't being great and wonderful. But Paul's like, that doesn't change how the Father wants to use you. So I'm only reiterating what God has said. You have to decide whether you're going to let the authority of the scriptures apply to you in that way, or if you will choose to just give God space in your life versus no, thank God he gives space to you in his life and mission, and you get to reorient your life that way with him. Revelation, God's authority. You are his ambassadors in his mission. There are no geographical boundaries to that mission. It's everywhere. I pray to God you would do it because I can't reach Ann Arbor. It's on you guys. You're God's hope for there. He wants to work through you. He could have done it 1,000 different ways, but he chose to plant his family in places where people need to be invited into his family. That's you guys. And he's counting on you to do it. He's given you this incredible opportunity to do it. I pray that you would do it. Hey, here's the deal too. Side note, God knows all you Michigan fans, they need Jesus. You know what I'm saying? You guys need Jesus very badly. I live in Penn State territory. I know you beat us last week. So gloat all you want for 1 week. Okay, another year. I don't know, whatever. We need Jesus over here. I'm dealing with the Penn State fans. You deal with those Michigan fans, all right? So the only other thing I would add to this too, just to, I think, give probably the other healthy conviction that you need as you consider these things is knowing that the thing that that Jesus set us off into being his ambassadors on his mission, being his family in a fallen world, and the task of being a steward of the good news towards those who are far from him. That the mission of God to go make disciples is really hard, and it takes a long time. And if you go into it thinking, how can I find the most efficient, fast way to do this? I think you're already misinformed about what it is. It's radically challenging to do because people are very challenging. I'm in that camp. You're in that camp. Every single one of you, like if I added up the years of all of you in that room, there are just decades of backstory to your life, right? There's just literally just decades of backstory that you've all taken various numbers of years to get where you're at spiritually, in the good or the bad, right? And that this is as a child of God. Some of you, I'm guessing in the 20s. We got some 20s in there. We got some 30s. That's a lot of years to kind of work to get where you're at. And some of that, even in the spiritual realm, is like, man, we bring a lot of baggage to this, and we've got a lot of fleshly patterns in our lives. And the journey of becoming a faithful disciple of Christ takes a long time. It just is. It's super challenging. The work of making a disciple is easily defined, but it's very difficult in its working out. And it requires faithfulness and patience and, sacrifice. I'll tell you, if it's anything I've learned in the last number of years too, it's like I'm never surprised at anything, even among believers who are on the journey of becoming disciples. I've seen people who have had so much opportunity, so much truth, so much investment in their lives, and just go literally decades of pushing it away and struggling in their flesh, even as children of God, just struggling, not seeing victory in some areas. I've seen others who have done some amazing things, and then an unbelievable, almost inexplicable fall happens because there's just such complexity to being children of God in a fallen world. And I only say this now, and I'll stop talking, and then let's do some chatting, get questions or whatever. I would just say this. One of the things I've noticed in coming back here versus serving overseas is the complexities of the influences that you have in this country at the spiritual level puts you in probably the worst possible situation to become a disciple of Christ. It's so challenging. It's so difficult. We've got massive cultural things that is being used against us to move us away from being a disciple of Christ. And you live in that. And those that you will be reaching live in that. We've got generations growing up with internet, devices, influences, social media. My gosh, don't get me started on this. There's so much. I remember not having the internet. I remember the first little CD-ROM that came in the mail that let us get on this new thing. Like what? We could send an email. Like we pretty much have landed on Mars. It was amazing. It's just silly now. No one even reads their email. I think my wife has 2,600 unread emails. We turned the little red bubble off because it's like, I'm like, turn the red bubble off. You're never going to read those emails. But I remember when that's all we had, when there was never social media, there was not this unbelievable technological ability to influence people at a spiritual level. And so I'm just telling you that to say, one of the things that is very rampant in the church right now is the belief that we can use all technologies to speed up the discipleship process. Like we can make it easier by using these things. And I would just plead with you again, go back to the authority of the scriptures. And Jesus chose to parachute himself in the human story to demonstrate that it needed to be done at a relational level because that's what God's like. He's relational. And he's not relational from a distance and through a media. He's relational in the presence of people. And if you want to be an ambassador of Christ, a faithful worker in God's mission, and then be used of him locally and globally, you've got to embrace the higher values of Jesus, the hard road, the difficulty, the challenge of relating to people and really demonstrating the Father to people on a personal level. It's very hard to do. And so I would just, this is my last thing. The place that if you want to go like, okay, what will this look like for me? I want you to just think about in the Gospels before Jesus is crucified and he's getting close to the Passion Week and he stands outside Jerusalem. You ever read that? It's this really profound interaction where Jesus, we get to kind of get inside his head and he says over Jerusalem, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I would have longed to gather you to myself like a hen gathers her chicks, but you were unwilling. And I'm telling you right now, that's the mission of God lived out in real life in a fallen world. Jesus, if it was Jesus himself with all of his power and discernment and ability and communication and all that, and largely the majority of them were unwilling to come to him, we should not be thinking we're going to come up with some cool way to make it really easy and really desirable, and all these people are going to flock to Jesus. Okay, that would be a bad expectation, and I would argue it's an unbiblical one. And it's better for us, for those of you in this room that are kind of going, what's our takeaways and where do we go? Know what you're getting into, right? Go into it with your eyes wide open. Hey, I want to be close to Jesus. I want to do things his way. And I need to expect what Jesus expected. And I need to assume that if it was difficult for him, it's probably going to be difficult for me too. But I want to be faithful like he was. And man, I just like, I would encourage you, look around that room. I don't know, there's like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, looks like, unless someone's hiding somewhere else, 11, 12 of you, something like that. Isn't that interesting? That's the number that Jesus chose. He did not start a mega movement of thousands. Yeah, see that? Thumbs up to that one. That's right. He didn't do that. Think about this. The God of heaven demonstrated something. He's like, if I could just get these 12 to buy into it, what could I do in the world? Read the rest of the story. And it wasn't even all those 12. It was certainly wasn't perfect, right? But some of those 12 said, that's it. I'll live my life for that. I'm going to do it your way. I'm going to follow your example. And I want to be considered in the company of Jesus. He totally overthrew the world of which they were living. I mean, he did amazing things through them with the same kind of group, just like you guys, same kind of group. He loves working through the small to make a massive impact. That's just kind of how he is. So that's enough of me talking. What, you guys have some questions, some thoughts? I don't care what some stuff from New Guinea, if you have a question about that, or what in the American context, whatever, I'll happy to give whatever kind of something I can give. Or Todd, you have something? Did I miss anything?
I got a quick one. Yeah. So speaking about like, a small group of people diving into this, long relationships wherever we're at, I think it's cool. Listen, you thinking about like how that context, it's so hard for me to take part in that here and be effective in that here. And so then I have an expectation that over there it's somehow different, and it's somehow like works different in other cultures or other places of the world when we're sending people. So it totally checks out. But bringing it to here, what have you seen in either, I guess you could speak to CR2, but specifically at your church, what's that look like then with the realities of like, there's all the technology, but there's also like crazy schedules, crazy We're busy
Yeah,
with everything all the time. And it's like you talk about sacrifice. Maybe the first big sacrifice is like sacrificing my time to be at places with people, or like I'm just thinking about building those relationships is hard, and the only way we really see it consistently and out there is in like a official setting where it's like someone's job, like someone's in ministry and their job is to meet
totally.
with someone or whatever. How
Yeah.
have you seen that kind of play out of building those deep relationships uh practically? Because that's pretty like it's a pretty massive thing to think about. Like I'm trying to grow in this myself, and then like thinking about pouring into other people consistently with all the like, yeah, I guess the first thing that comes to mind is like schedules and
Yeah. Yeah.
business.
Totally. Again, I would, my first thing would be to go back to authority, go back to Revelation. Okay, what did Jesus do? Right? Do you remember how this all started? He goes up to some fishermen and he says, "Follow me." See, he liked that one. Follow me. These iPhones, man, they love the Bible or something. They keep thumbs up in the good stuff. Is that what? Nah, I doubt it. He says, you know what it is? It must be if I do my thumb up at any point. Does it?
No.
No. Yeah, yeah, that's it.
Oh,
It is because he's doing that.
Is it? I was doing that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, look at
You got it.
Wow.
that's amazing. You learned something today. See, this is what's going to happen. This is the only thing you'll remember from this morning is this stupid thumbs up that kept coming. Okay, I got to keep my thumb down. So if I do this, you know it means thumbs up. Jesus went to him and he said something like, again, like, let's just get basic with it because it's real basic. It's not complex in principle. It's only complex when we make it complex in our lives. But Jesus went to him and he said, "Follow me and I'll make you fishers of men." Guess what he didn't do? He didn't orient himself around them. He made them orient themselves around him. You see what he dealt with the most fundamental thing right off the bat. If you want to follow me, if you want to be used of me in eternal things, you need to orient yourself differently. You just need to. If it's a negotiation of authority, it's not going to work. And so here's what Jesus kept doing over and over again. He kept moving forward into what his Father was about. And if you actually do your study of the Gospels, you'll find that he periodically was actually weeding the crowd out of those that were following him for the wrong reasons. You know, at one point, he has a big, massive movement, and we would all go, look how awesome Jesus is. He's got over 100,000 followers. He's monetized on YouTube now. No, he actually goes in and goes, "You're all after me for the wrong reasons for what you'll get out of me." And he confronts them, and a bunch leave. And what is he doing? He keeps turning up the proverbial heat, and in a good way, of to follow after Christ. It necessitates sacrifice. So there's no more practical thing to say to a group of people going, "Well, what does that look like?" Well, it looks like a reorientation of your priorities. Oh, that might have been a thumbs down. It's a hard one. And here's why it's different in this culture compared to the rest of the world. We just have absolutely so much that we can do. And I've been there to Ann Arbor. I was out there for a little bit. And you guys are way ahead of us here. Like, I live in central Pennsylvania. It's pretty much hunting is what people do here, or hiking and eat cheesesteaks. That's the sum total of what we have. There's just not much to do. You know what I'm saying? There's not a lot here. And even here, we have that challenge. I'm seeing this affect young families at an epidemic level. They put their children in every possible activity under the sun. They have them in sports at a commitment level I didn't even have when I was a senior in high school. I see fourth and fifth graders doing unbelievable commitments to sports, and it's almost always at the leading of the parents. And I would say that is an orientation of priorities. It's believing that that is the most valuable thing for the child, that that experience is the necessary experience to raise up that child. I would say that needs to be radically rethought about as parents. If we're going to be disciples of Christ, we need to think about, well, what would be the activities that we would want our children to actually be a part of? And I'm not trying to poo-hoo. If someone's in there, you got kids, you having sports, please don't throw the eggs now. I'm not saying don't do that. All my kids have played sports. How that practically looked for us, we told all of our kids, you can play any sport you want. You get one sport, one season every year. You can't play 3 sports, and you can't play soccer all year long. You can't do fall, winter, this league, spring, that you can't, because our family has other values that are more important that we want you to be a part of and to do and to be a part of. So that's just like when you say you can't eat the cookies before dinner, because you're allowed to do that as a parent. We did that with our kids, and my kids are all older now. Almost all of them are older and graduated, and I've got one daughter, and it's the same thing. It's just that's just how we operate. I've been yelled at by soccer coaches. I got yelled at from a coach. Say I was a bad parent because I wouldn't let my son play 3 seasons in a row. And that was okay. I'm super glad where he's at today with God. And I think that decision had a part in that. And it wasn't everything, but I think it had a part in him growing up, knowing what matters to him. That was what I'm saying is that's an example of I'm trying to cover my thumbs. That was an example of making a choice on principle, not on just what everybody in the world is doing. We had to, like, practically speaking, there's a ton of things that we don't do that everybody else in the world does, even financially. Not because it's bad to do all those things per se, but we have other values we're living for. And so we choose not to invest all of our time and our money in eating out, for example. That's fine to do. There's nothing wrong with eating out. I like good food as much as the next guy. Believe me, it's not because I don't want to. It's because it's a disciplined choice to say, God, I want to be about what you're doing. And we make it a priority to have people into our home where we cook food for them so we can spend time with them, including my unbelieving neighbors. I'm like looking right across the window at them. We have them over because we're trying to build a relationship so they can see who Jesus is. And so we make different priorities, and we limit the things that we could participate in under the rubric of eternity. Like what does eternity mean in this decision? And I know some of you are like, but wait a minute, you could go out to eat with unbelievers. And like, see, yeah, you could. You totally could. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm saying there's a different way that we look at what we give our time, or I should just say what we give our resources to. Your time is an incredibly valuable resource. Your money actually is an incredibly valuable resource on 2 levels, right? Jesus talked about it more than anything else, money. And you know why? Because he said this really important principle: where our treasure is, there our heart will be also. Think about it. Guess what he's saying? The most powerful way to bend your heart to the things of God is to give sacrificially of your resources toward it. And you watch, your heart will go there too. Anybody here planning for retirement? Please put your hands up if you're planning for retirement. If you're planning for retirement in any way and you invest in any little bit into that, all of a sudden you care about the stock market, don't you? You're like, I would prefer the green arrow go up rather than the red arrow go down. Why? I'm investing in that. So that makes me invested in that. Do it more so for the things of eternity. Watch your heart follow. But don't mistake your money and your time. And man, in America, our time usually centers around our comfort and our pleasure, right? Our comfort and our pleasure. There's a young couple here in our church who's involved in one of our communities. So thankful for them. They've got this little girl, love her to bits, little booger. She's cute as a button. Man, I sneak her candy every chance I can. So sometimes when the parents aren't looking. I know that's not kosher nowadays, but I still do it because that's just kind of how I am. I love the girl. They're wonderful. They are a part of a community who gets together probably, well, we're talking like 3 times a week. So you know what they'll do? They go to where it's at, and they've taught their daughter, you're going to sleep in the pack and play. This is a little baby. From when she was a baby, it's like, this matters to us. So we're going to teach our daughter how when we're going to go anywhere, we set up that pack and play in the room and she goes to bed. Because we're not going to keep saying we can't be a part of things because of our daughter. And you know what? That little girl, she will sleep in that pack and play in any stinking room. It doesn't matter how bright, dark, what kind of music's playing in the background. And here's my estimation. That little girl is going to benefit the rest of her life spiritually because her parents from her youngest age said, the priority for us is not our comfort and ease of the baby schedule. It's actually living for eternity. And if it means she didn't sleep the best one night, that is not the end of the world, but we would want her growing up seeing it as normal that we would prioritize being with the body of Christ. And I tell this to other young families in our church all the time. If they can do it, and you don't even have kids and you're going, I can't make it or be a part, I'm like, you're making choices, and those choices have impact. So if you want the blunt answer, that's kind of the blunt answer. You have to make choices to live in a different way than the world tells you. Just like when Jesus went up to Peter and said, follow me and I'll make you a fisher of men. And he gave it up. He gave that up. That was a choice, that saying like, okay, follow Jesus is more important than what I need to secure what I think matters from a worldly perspective. And I don't think God's even asking that of us in this culture. Some, it might be at some point, but I think he's asking everybody, all of you right now, he's asking me the same thing. Like, what are you going to give your time for? I mean, what are you going to give your time for? If you watch 3 football games a week, nothing wrong with watching football, but if you watch 3 a week, that's like 3 evenings where you're like, I don't want to do anything else. I want my popcorn and my football. I get it. I enjoy that as well. But if there are opportunities to be with the body of Christ, to grow up together, to be in his word, to build relationships with the lost, those are all sacrificial things that they aren't always fun. It requires a choice of priorities. And again, I think that choice is made on authority. What did Jesus show? And what is he asking? So, yeah, I think that's been true in CR, Todd, to your question. CR had the same struggle. They still do to this day. There are people that I invested years in, and they just flat out don't want to follow Christ. They don't. They don't have Instagram either. They can't go out to eat. They're like, there's none of those same things, but they find ways to be distracted as well and to live for other things, and they don't want to follow Christ. It happens over there. It happens here. I would say at the outset, that's about as practical as I can be on that. Did that answer your question, Todd?
Yeah.
Or did he leave? I can't even see his head. Did he walk out a back door somewhere?
Yeah, I've been
There he is.
sleeping over here. Yeah.
I was going to say, I heard so
Got another question.
Thank you. This has been really, really helpful and great to think about. But my question is, how do you, like, what is your practice in thinking about operationalizing this practically? Like, how do you sit down as a family or whatever you do and decide this is how we're going to spend our time, how much we're going to, or do you do this? Like, we're going to have believers over this often, non-believers over this often. And how do you visit that? This may be my type A coming out, but how do you continuously revisit that?
Sure. Type A is good. It's good that you can say that about yourself at the outset. I would say that's very important. It really is, honestly. Most people aren't very honest with themselves. And so you kind of need to know first that the Spirit wants to guide your life, not your type A. Although he wants to really use your type A. Like that's very important to God. It's very useful for his family. But that, you know what I'm saying? That we all can kind of go, that's the way I am. And so I resort to, okay, if I can nail this down on the calendar, then it'll be missional. And the Holy Spirit loves coming in and going, ha ha, watch. I'm going to wreck your little world and take your calendar and chuck it out the window. And things are going to happen that you couldn't put on the calendar. And so that's just how God is. And but yes, we talk about all those things. One of the ways too is the structure of our church. So some of this is, I hate to use that word, but we organize the majority of our body life around smaller communities. And our communities aren't a like once a month Bible study kind of thing. They're very, very like they're led, I should say, they're led in such a way that we're trying to both live, model, and lead believers into what it means to be God's ambassadors in a fallen world together as his family. So that's we've organized it that way, not because that's like some strategy thing and we read a book. But again, what do we look at? That's what Jesus did, right? He could have come and just said, the Father sent me, everybody come, listen to what I say. Now everyone else go figure it out individually. No, he said, no, follow me. Like we need to be a community together. And I'm going to walk with you into all these situations, right? And I'm going to show you a model that one day I'm going to set you loose to go do yourself, so you can have people follow after you and learn, and then you'll send them out. It's God's math isn't addition, it's multiplication. That's how he wants to, drastically impact the world. So we just said that's the kind of communities we want to lead. Smaller groups of people led by faithful ones who have demonstrated a life of being missional in the world, who can disciple people, but also bring them along in the journey. So my group, for example, like I'm just in the course of a week, I'm rubbing shoulders with people in my community. Good grief, 4 times probably in various ways. Like sometimes the ladies in our group, they get together each once a week. The guys in our group will get together once a group. Then we have an all group thing where we all get together, and usually there's food there because that's important to God, not just because we like it, but the sharing of food together. That's why the Lord's Supper actually really mattered to God, because something is communicated and reinforced when we share food together. It's what families do. You know what I'm saying? It's not like a club. So we have like that where we're always sharing a meal. Like we're doing a big Thanksgiving thing today, later with the whole community. The ladies get together. I forget when it is, Thursday mornings. I don't know when they do their thing. The guys, we do thing. And then we have other little things, like we've got some young dudes in our group, in our community, like a junior and a senior in high school, that 1 or 2 of us guys will actually meet with them and disciple them more personally. All that's happening in the course of a normal week. And that's not church on Sunday. That's like, and that's how we live life. And our aim is not to start groups that stay together forever. Our aim is, like these 2 young guys, our mind is like, just like Jesus wanted to prepare Peter to send him out, I'm investing in these 2 young guys because I think God would have me give of my life for them, so that in the not too distant future, we could go, now you're ready to lead a community out of your own home. You're ready to do this. You're ready to bring some younger believers along with you. And so it's this investing in believers to raise them up into faithfulness and maturity to do that. And so that's happening in the course of the week. But we usually have, like my wife, and I say the planning, to be fair, my wife does this and I go along. Like we know what we want to do. I'm not micromanaging the calendar, so to speak. I'm like, thank God she knows, she plans food and who and what. And I'm just like, tell me who's coming over. Because I don't really care. It's like, we just know that's a value that we want to have somebody over. And in the course of a month, we usually have somebody over once a week as a family, like for a family meal, like the old school way, right? You sit around the same table, you eat your food and talk and that kind of thing. So we do that once a week. And we usually kind of say in the course of a month, we want to have maybe, at least 25 to 50% of that be unbelievers, like unbelieving friends. But again, a lot of that's not even happening just in meals. My wife has these 2 ladies that she's reaching out to. One of them she does a book club with. So she's in a book club with a bunch of unbelievers. She goes to once a month. But she's like with that lady all the time. It's the thumb again. It's the thumb. She's with that lady. She just went out somewhere with them the other night. Two of her unbelieving friends from the book club. So they went somewhere. I forget what they were doing. I don't even know. They went somewhere to something. I don't know. Hang out, talk, blah, blah. They read their books. I don't know what they do. Building friendships. The other one is a big hiker or walker. So though she goes on hikes with her, like, I don't know, at least twice, 3 times a month. Just they go on these long 2-hour wherevers. I don't even know where they go. So there's this like real life rhythm thing. And that's what it looks like. And yet I would also tell you too, there's times when it's dry. You know what I mean? It's times when it's like we're reaching out to these people and they're not interested in a certain, or they're busy, and it doesn't work. And it's not perfect. It can be very frustrating at times. Sometimes our community, like people kind of, they get not as interested and they're not showing up, and it's hard. It's not perfect. So yeah, that's how it looks in probably more the good. But I would say we still aim for that. That's what we're aiming for. And we want to be faithful in that to the best of our ability. So you can see why we have to kind of say, well, what are we going to give our time? Like, what are we going to give our time for? A lot of fun play. Like we more plan those things. Do you know what I'm saying? Like yesterday, my daughter, my wife went to a movie. They went and got sushi and went to a movie. Like that doesn't happen for us on normal weekends. That was like a unique thing. I took my boys to the Penn State game. So that we don't even do that ever. That's the first time I've ever taken my sons to a game. So that was like, we sort of planned that. That's a big, it's like, well, this is cool. We don't get to do this. We normally do this. We normally don't do this. So we plan more the fun, that, and more of life is built around the other rhythm.
Maybe Carrie should have given the structured answer to that then, huh?
No kidding. She's not here. She would be a great one. Hey, that's a good point, Todd. If you can feel free to give her contact information and mine to anybody. My wife's a great one to talk to about it because she'll be very honest with you. She would tell you warts and all what this looks like, struggles and all. She would not hide any of that from you. And if you're a mom that's kind of like, what how could we structure the family around it? She'd be great to talk to, probably much better than me. I don't really do anything, to be honest. I'm just kidding. Any other one? I don't know what your time commitments are. I'm free. I'm
time. Yeah.
All right.
Or as far as service ended and picking up kids and all that. But does anyone else have any other questions, I guess, to wrap up?
How do you make your church activities intentional? How do you make your church activities intentional for accomplishment?
For mission? Yeah, for outreaches. Yeah. For us, that has meant I would say this too, like there's a lot of different ways that can happen, right? So don't take anything I say as critical of any other structures or whatever. So it's not the case. I think the DNA of mission can infiltrate a lot of things in some really cool ways. Personally ours, and we're not a big church, you know what I'm saying? So there's a certain freedom that we have with our flexibility of things, and I think our church was founded on kind of this, let's not hold on to doing things a certain way. Like if we see it as biblical, then we need to change something, then we'll change it with teaching and instruction and all that kind of stuff. Ours has mainly been, we have no other programs or ministries other than these communities. That includes youth group. We do not have a youth group. We do not have men's ministry. We do not have women's ministry. We just don't have any of that. We've said this living together in real life as God's family, because it takes so much to actually try to do it in this culture, that we just orient everything toward that. And then us as elders, our primary ministry responsibility is the teaching of the church corporately into this vision, and then the equipping of our leaders of those communities to more effectively disciple and shepherd people into this. So we're very kind of like, my main task is teaching from a visionary standpoint to the church and training and equipping of leaders. I don't lead any other like things. There's nothing else that we have. That doesn't mean it's perfect and the best. I'm not saying that. It just, that's for us, it had to be that, or else there's just no time to actually live in community. So let me just give you a practical answer to that. The issue of youth group, you're probably like, well, what the heck do you do with youth? Because you're supposed to have that, right? It's not that we don't care for our youth. Here's what we've chosen to do. So if you're a student, like we would say like the old like 9th through 12th grade, up until that point, the kids are obviously under the discipleship of their parents. When they get into the between 9th and 12th grades, we do two things. One of them is we just somewhat, when we can do it, we just have these hangouts where they can bring their unbelieving friends and they can do some fun stuff together, just as an opportunity to sort of reach out to their friends. Okay. It's just like, get them in a contact. We'll do whatever fun things with their friends. We're not really teaching them. We're not doing all that stuff there. It's just an opportunity for them to do something fun together with their friends and start building relationships with their friends outside of school. When you get to about a junior or senior in our church, we give them the opportunity, with their parents' approval and help with us as leaders. 11th or 12th grader can actually go and join their own community apart from their parents. So we actually would, instead of doing a separate kids only ministry, we bring them into a community that's diverse, that has older people, younger people, 20-year-old couples, 30-year-old young families, and a junior or senior in high school can go out from their parents' community and join that one as an adult themselves, and begin to be discipled into what it looks like to actually live in God's family of their own choosing, not just following their parents, but of their own choosing. And so with that, we actually start discipling them. The two guys I mentioned, their parents are in our church and they go to different communities. But now that they're both seniors, they come into our group. And so we disciple them, trying to prepare them for their future as college students or whatever. Yeah, so that's how we do it. That looked cool. Like the door's locked, no one can leave. I like
Yeah.
that, Todd. That's a nice method.
Fire hazard, yeah.
Thanks for coming. Door's locked. You're not allowed to leave yet.
New strategy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. I like that one. That's how you can get people committed. Just get them there once and don't let them leave.
All right, cool. Well, I think we gotta wrap up on our end, Lane, but thanks for taking the time to share some and hang out via thumbs up Zoom.
See if we can make it celebrate. Boom! Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, feel free to, if any of you have any questions about it and just whatever, honestly, you can send something my way anytime. Be happy to try to respond to you and help in any way.